Hello, everyone. I'm Marco Cordova from Monarch Private Capital. Welcome to our panel, Lights, Camera, America. I head up Monarch's film division, where we work with many studios and independent filmmakers like yourselves with monetizing their tax credits, helping many productions broker their credits, as well as doing some financing. I'm very pleased to be here. I think this is my 16th Sundance Film Festival over the past 20 years. I've noticed a lot of changes since my first Sundance, but I think the main thing that hasn't changed is a lot of talk about the latest and greatest tax credits and incentives. So that's why most of you are here today. Especially now, there's a lot of talk with many people out of work. I've seen countless people, even during Sundance the other day, they've been out of work and looking for work. And a lot of U.S. filmmakers, we really need to make sure to help different U.S. filmmakers with programs. We're planning to do an extensive overview regarding state incentives and also possibly talk about a federal film commission. We're very pleased to partner with Film USA. Film USA, I met with, is there any Film USA people here? Okay. I met with the founders of Film USA, Katie Pryor and also Tony Armour, about 5 years ago. They talked about creating this coalition of U.S. state and local film commissions. We don't have a federal film commission, unfortunately, and of course we don't have a U.S. federal tax credit. But I think Film USA has done a great job so far, and we decided to have this panel, especially to promote U.S. filmmaking. We have a brief video from Katie. She gave birth last week, and through movie magic, she created a video, just last weekend. So I think Katie's done a wonderful job. I thank her, doing double duty right now. But can we show the video from Katie from Film USA?
Hello everyone, on behalf of Film USA and our partners at Monarch Private Capital, we want to welcome you to this important panel discussion and reception alongside the 2025 Sundance Film Festival. Film USA is an association of USA Film Commissions. When we founded this organization, we had a very clear mission to grow and strengthen production in the United States. One of the ways that we do this is by advocating for a federal film office. While the U.S. remains a global leader in the industry, we're still at a critical juncture because right now we're losing hundreds of jobs and billions of dollars to productions in other countries. The discussion on why is absolutely critical because over 100 countries offer some kind of federal film office, over 75 of them have federal film incentives, and the U.S. is not on that list. This is about the future of American storytelling. It's about ensuring that our local communities, from small towns to big cities, reap the economic and cultural benefits of local film production. It's about creating jobs, stimulating local economies, and preserving our nation's rich, diverse stories for future generations. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Enjoy this panel, Sundance 2025, the reception, and we look forward to building the future of Film USA with you.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I think right after she gave birth, she called me like in 2 hours. I was like, what are you doing? I have here with us a very distinguished panel. The first one I want to introduce is actually part of Film USA, Allison Whitmer. She's also the film commissioner for the great state of Montana. I also want to mention she has a Sundance connection. I think her first project was The Horse Whisperer with Robert Redford, so she has that little Sundance connection. But Allison, why don't you give us some more information about what you do and what you think the current state of U.S. filmmaking is?
Well, thanks so much, Marco. Well, in Montana, our closest neighbor, of course, is Canada. So we see a lot of cross-border activity with Westerns in Canada and us making Westerns in Montana. You're probably familiar with the television show Yellowstone or 1923. Never heard of it. Or 1883 or A River Runs Through It or The Revenant. We find that Canada and Montana have a lot of the same natural beauty. So we consider ourselves collaborators with, Saskatchewan and Alberta. And we've definitely had some shows go back and forth across the border. So we think that Film USA is a wonderful organization that if you haven't joined yet, you should. It's free, where we can talk about all the things that the United States has to offer and also the things that we can do in export trade. So the film industry is one of the strongest export industries for the country, and Film USA is really committed to helping everyone in the film business, understand economically how important we are. And Montana, with our tax credit program, we're doing close to $200 million worth of business a year, which 8 years ago we were doing $10 million. So that's the difference for having economic benefits in filmmaking. So yes, Marco, thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, the next panelist I've actually known for over 10 years. Dave DeVore, I've known him since he worked at Fox TV, and now he's the director of production incentives at Netflix. One of the first projects I worked with him on, I didn't know what that project was at first. It was Stranger Things Season 1. And ever since then, Netflix has grown
tiny show.
probably too much. Too much. But, it's great to have Dave with us. And if you could give us some insight of what you do and what you think the current state of the U.S. filmmaking is, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. It's good to be here. My team is on the front lines, basically working hand in hand with our internal production and finance folks, our creatives, and external producers to find production solutions and figure out how all of the pieces, the puzzle pieces, can be put together. But it all starts with the creative, and the creative is number one. We come in after the fact, and once things are at a certain point and certain locations are identified as possibilities, then we try and come in and advise to the best of our ability the current state of incentives in those locations, what it means to our producers. We're sort of the go-between. We work closely hand in hand with the state film commissions to really get the latest and greatest information out to our creatives and our producers so that they can make informed decisions. We have a ton of volume, lots of different shows, everything from indie film and tentpole features all the way down to children's programming, unscripted, documentary films and series, etc. So it's exciting to work in a place where there's really no limits in terms of the types of content that we can put out there. And so, but that does present some challenges in terms of putting those financial building blocks together for those types of wide range of different types of programming. I've worked in the indie film world on incentives, but I've also kind of evolved as the business has evolved and as Netflix has evolved. I've been there for almost 8 years, and I always joke, in Netflix years, that's a long time. A lot of things have changed within Netflix and with the business in general, and so that's created a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges, and things have changed just so fast. So I'm happy to be here as part of this panel to really talk about some solutions based on the current state of things, and I think there are opportunities out there to really make some productive changes. So
Thank you,
super
Dave.
happy to be here.
Great. Next up is the fabulous Chiquita Banks.
Thank you. I am fabulous.
I've known Chiquita for a while now. I think you've been at 3 different studios, and before that, you were an auditor with one of the regional CPA firms in Georgia. Monarch is based in Georgia, so we have that Georgia connection. Chiquita, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do, and especially with your new company, Bankable Consultants.
Thank you. So again, Chiquita, I'm a tax attorney. And what does that mean? my life is about tax credits and incentives and economic development incentives as well too. I am a film finance nerd. You know, I like to work to help producers and much more indie and smaller producers to find funding for their projects. So whether that's connecting them with potential investors, whether that's making sure they understand the value, the face value of their tax credit so that they can get a loan against that. I am one of those people who's wholly focused on helping you to get your project come to fruition, but only if you do good business. And what I've seen so much of, and I think this is one of the issues that we're seeing a lot in the changing times, is that, you know, producers are amazing creatives. You have these great ideas. I love them. I can't wait to hear about them. I'd rather see them. And how do you do that? You have to have a good budget. You have to have a clean budget. You have to have a production accountant. You have to have a line producer who's produced in that area before. You can't just say, you know, oh yeah, my homegirl from Croatia is gonna come over and we're gonna shoot in Atlanta. That's probably not gonna work. Not to say that it can't work unless she shot there before, but one of my jobs is to help the creative and the non-business producer better understand the business of entertainment. I also, and I've forgotten about this, I forget about it even though I do it once a week. I'm also a film finance professor at Georgia State University Law in my spare time. Yeah, right. When I'm not sleeping, in the middle of the night. And I have to say this because I know that Georgia Entertainment is here as well too. Hey, I'm the only Georgia person, right? Like, Randy would kick me if I didn't say that.
Yeah, they're our media sponsor too. Thank you, Georgia Entertainment.
Yeah, Randy was looking at me like she better say it. So, you know, I'm blessed that I've worked at Viacom, Disney, Fox. I've worked for and done work for Dave before. I've gotten the opportunity to see the big studios and the indie studios. And there is a way in which we should all be doing business. And part of my job and what I get excited about is making sure that folks are doing business that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Chiquita.
Thank you.
Next up is Stephen Demmler. He's the CEO of Talon Entertainment. He also has a film here premiering at Sundance, The Rabbit Hole. So,
Rabbit Trap.
oh, Rabbit Trap. Okay. I asked him earlier and I messed up.
Too.
Okay.
I do it too.
And then also he had a film, he produced a film last year that was up for competition at Cannes, Canada. Stephen was also named as one of the new filmmakers to look for by Variety. So we're very honored to have Stephen here. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Talon Entertainment?
Thank you. I apologize in advance about my voice. We had the premiere yesterday, and I was out quite late. I started in entertainment. My first job was at Saturday Night Live in the art department and other roles. And then, unlike some of you creatives, I chickened out because I wanted to be a writer, but I also really love food and shelter, so I got into finance. And I was a trader at hedge funds around the world for a while. And then when I started to get older, I was like, I've never tried to do the only thing that matters to me, so I might as well give it a go. So I started Talon because I figured if I started a business that financed films and I produced, and I showed up to agencies with a bucket of money, they would let me in the door and pretend to be my friend. And that is true, they will. So what I did was I started this company and raised a fund. We started financing films as an executive producer only. And then I started, once I established kind of a reputation and I felt I learned the way the tax credits worked and the business model and economic models worked, I started looking for scripts or producers who were above me and who had been doing this for a long time. And I glommed onto them and said, I'll finance the film, but you get me as a producer also. And you're my boss. You know, I'm here to learn from you, but those are the breaks, basically. And started doing that. And then eventually, learned enough to where creatives came to us. I did an MFA at Tisch in dramatic writing, so I've written stuff now, and it's slowly grown into this thing where we're co-fiing a lot of work with, I did this one with SpectraVision. I'm a partner at SpectraVision, also Elijah Wood's production company. And then we have, a nice roster of projects and creatives who trust us to care about their creative vision, but also not betray them economically, so that when they make a great film, it doesn't die out there, and then they're never given the chance by financiers again. Because you can make a beautiful film, but if it blows up your backers, you're not getting more backers. So there's a real responsibility for even me, who's aspiring to write more and creative produce more, to know the ins and outs of the tax credits in the business, to shoot responsibly. That's all I got. That's me.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And last but not least, my good friend Fred Siegel. He's actually one of the first people I've met at Sundance many years ago. We have a lot in common too. He's also a CPA. So, we do a lot of boring tax code talk that you guys probably don't want to listen to. But Fred specializes in a lot of East Coast incentives. I've worked with him on numerous shows in New Jersey and also in New York. Fred, why don't you give us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi. Since everybody seems to be giving their background, I'll give a little bit about myself. A long time ago, I was a professional musician. I played more jazz than any other style. I had a teaching practice, but I was basically an independent artist. I left music and got involved in a couple of startup ventures, wrote a couple of business plans. One was for gourmet coffee bars in 1985, before they were around. And I was probably too much of a perfectionist as an artist. I wanted to get it really perfect. And as I think everybody here would agree, in business, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. And after that, I decided to finally go to college. I went to Columbia University, and then I worked at one of the big four accounting firms and did my graduate work at New York University, and left that big four world and somehow ended up starting to work with indie filmmakers in late 1992, and looked up and quickly realized that the filmmakers that I was working with were just like the musicians I'd been around several years earlier. And it was really just fortuitous. I started to work with a filmmaker I'm sure everybody here has heard of, Christine Vachon, in 1993, and we worked together to this day. And I fell into that early New York indie film scene, and in 1997 opened up my own practice. Somebody asked me the other night, what do you do? And she was really looking for that very simple answer. So I said, well, we help you get money and we help you keep it. And I know marketing-wise, that's a nice little soundbite, and it sounds good. I mean, ultimately, that is what we try to do. Excuse me. I understand the lives of producers, I think, pretty well, because my own life has been creative, entrepreneurial, and management, and I think that's what producers do. And I feel a kinship with them, and we try to work with them in a way where we look at them and go, who are you? What are you trying to do? Can we help? And if so, how? The whole orientation is collaboration. And so for us, our work really best begins at the very beginning in what we call the pre-financing stage, when you're setting up companies, when you're looking for money, when you're talking to the lawyer, when your agreements are being put in place. Because whether you understand it or not, at that point, you're making certain decisions which are going to play out later in terms of when you get the film tax credit money and what that means in terms of tax consequences. And anytime money is flowing, taxes become part of what come into play, which means that your investors are going to be affected. So we look very closely at the relationship between the producer and the investor, because we understand that's where the money comes from to make the movies, and obviously you want to build relationships. So
Thank you, Fred.
Yes.
Great. Our main topic here is really to try to promote filming in the U.S. With Runaway Production. I just wanted to kind of briefly touch upon what your experience is, and kind of and especially with Dave and Steven, since you guys are working with different shows, what's your main, what are the things you look for between filming in the U.S. and overseas? Do you get places?
Sure.
So, the building blocks of a budget are really, it's a complex undertaking to get a show to that point where you're locking a budget on target. So obviously incentives are a huge part of that, and have become even more important over the years. There are strong incentives overseas. That's just the reality. But there are super strong incentives here in the U.S. as well. And so, where we can, we try and keep production as close as possible to us here in the U.S. But at the end of the day, we have to serve the creative and serve the project. So we look at a lot of different things. After the creative, it's production resources, infrastructure, stage space, crew depth. Do we have crews available? And those are all huge considerations. And so, is there one thing that tips the scales, from producing in the U.S. to producing overseas? I don't think so, but I think it would almost be easier if there was just one thing. And just from my being around this and doing this for 10 years, I haven't seen that. And so it's a mixed bag, but I think there are strategic pockets where things can be addressed. And I know that our state, film commissioners and tax authorities and politicians are, in key places are looking for opportunity. But, I think now is a good time with all the changes in the industry, changes in people's viewing habits. The competitive landscape is tighter than ever. This is a good time to have this conversation to try and figure out how we can compete even more strongly. So,
Thank you, Dave. Stephen?
Sure. It's complicated, right? I'll just remove from the stuff you said and just focus on maybe from the perspective of somebody trying to stand up a film. I backwards engineer it, right? We have a film that we like creatively, and then I immediately go to, let's assume we execute this and it's a great film, because that's what we're aiming at, how do we sell it, and how is that the most optimal sale for the investors who took a risk on who took an equity position in a very risky asset class. And you can de-risk them by participating in incentive programs that are higher to get more secure debt, cash flow that's not actually, it's oversimplifying, but you can think of tax credits as almost like a sale at a department store. And a $5 million film with a 20% incentive is almost like, a 20% off sale, usually $4 million buys a $5 million film. So when I'm looking for the way to maximize that, because the money I don't spend on equity then goes to the screen, right? Buyers are buying the face on the screen most of the time, right? That's what they care about. That's what each of us click on, is Ryan Gosling's face. If I can't afford him because I have to spend that money on hard dollar costs when I could have gotten an incentive and then taken a loan there and used our equity on paying him more money that it costs to get him, our sale will be lower, and it becomes more complicated. So I'm always looking for, how do we engineer a way to spend the most money on the things that actually sell the film? And one way to do that is to creatively structure tax credits, incentives, grants, in-kind services. And it's tough here compared. Canada, we shot in New York, but that was the most ridiculously small budget and a 17-day shoot, and it's kind of an outlier. I produced a film with Elijah called Bookworm. I can't, without saying the exact numbers or whatever, eventually 80% almost was soft money through all the different buckets we got. So we shot in New Zealand. One, it's beautiful. Two, it's 80% off sale. What was I supposed to do?
So, what's soft money?
Yep, with soft money. Oh, what's soft money?
What is soft money?
Do you want to say? Because my voice is going.
Yeah, but make sure we're level setting, because sometimes we can all use, have you ever gone to a new company and they have like a ton of new acronyms and you're like, the ABCs of 1, 2, 3, I don't know what that is. But, and this is from the professor. So soft money versus hard money. Hard money, you have to give back. Soft money, you don't have to give back. So an incentive or in-kind services, a free building, free use of equipment, those are all considered soft money investments in your project. Versus hard money, he wants his money back. Talon wants their money back. And any debt, and most projects live off of debt, that has to be paid back. So the more that you can increase your incentives, your grants, your friends that'll work for free, your mom. I love my mom. She's like, you need some help? I'm like, yes, mama. No, but you can't work for me. But but she works for free, you know? So that's making sure that as indie producers that you know the lingo. So when you get in a meeting with Talon, you don't sound like you understand what he's saying, right? That's super important. I'm sorry if I took it away.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, that's good. Thanks,
Okay.
Professor Chiquita.
Yeah, and I was gonna just add co-productions, you know, we have treaties, certain jurisdictions treaty with other jurisdictions and say, hey, I'm country A and I'm country B, and we're gonna work together to make sure that, you know, our incentives work for each other and that our folks can work. So you want to look for that. If you film in the United States, you don't need a co-production treaty. And I won't bore you all, but I'm sure Fred is thinking tax treaty too. As well, reciprocal tax treaty. So you have Ryan Gosling, and how do we know if we take him to South Africa that his income or whatever taxes he pays on that South African income will cut his tax liability in the United States, because the U.S. still wants their money. You don't need a tax treaty or a reciprocal tax treaty if you keep them at home. So, sorry, I jumped in, but they didn't say it. So.
This is good. Good talk. One thing I wanted to mention too, I think a lot, especially new producers, they're asking for soft money. You know, you actually need to have some money at first to get access to soft money. So just keep that in mind. You can't just magically get a loan if you don't have the funding in the first place. So that's usually like one of the beginner questions we always hear, especially with the newer producers. You know, talking about the latest and greatest incentives and also promoting U.S. incentives, I wanted to kind of go to some of the different states that offer incentives. I think this group here has a great experience and bandwidth with different types of incentives. Obviously, Allison, you know, you speak on behalf of Montana. Can you give us some any juicy tidbits or updates that we might not have heard of?
Sure. Well, one of the great things about Montana is we do not have a sales tax. So when you work up your budget, you can just take most of that sales tax money and just kick it right out. So that's usually a 5 to 7% savings right off the top. That, you know, most producers, there's only 3 states in the country that don't have a sales tax. So that's one of our little hidden gems. We do have a 20% transferable income tax, and we are in a legislative session. So everybody out there knows that the tax credits can change during a session. We are no exception. We have 2 bills that one's been introduced, another one's coming. One bill would like to raise our tax credit substantially. One would like to raise it in a different way, a little less substantially. So we're looking forward to seeing how those bills work their way through our system. And we also find that in our region, we are unique because we are in a region with Idaho, which does not have either a film office or a tax credit. Wyoming, which has a film office but no credits. And North Dakota and South Dakota, who's do not have that much film support. So in our adjacent region, we find that our main competitors and people that we collaborate with are Utah, Washington, and Oregon, and Colorado. And so one of the things we're really wanting to do is, in terms of what you're doing in terms of like tax treaties and CPA work, is really collaborate with all the states, because, you know, South Dakota is known as being a really interesting state to do business for incorporating in, and Wyoming can be that way too. So you can have some nice collaborative financial instruments, but you do want to talk to your CPAs and attorneys, because it can get complicated fast.
Thank you. One of the states that I work a lot in is Georgia. You know, Georgia's, you know, been very big in production the last 10 years. I've worked with numerous shows with Dave and Chiquita. Can you give us some insight on what you like about Georgia, and kind of what do you think it will take for them to go to that next level and keep production shooting in Georgia? You know, I'm getting a lot of calls now from various sound stages that, you know, are not filling up right now. Ever since the strikes, you know, they're not getting the work they used to. What do you think that could improve, and what we should do to help, you know, Georgia production thrive?
Yeah, I know.
It's complicated, but no, I mean, Georgia's really, they've been around for a long time in terms of their tax credit. They've built a production and creative kind of ecosphere around that, and that's paid dividends. But now, you know, as Marco mentioned, things have changed, and things can change quickly in terms of production volume. But you know, what we look for is a stable credit, a stable incentive, a reliable incentive that's funded generously and consistently. We look for administrative ease, and I'm getting a little nerdy right now, but it's important because there are a lot of steps that go into securing and capturing a tax credit. One of the big ones is the audit process, and you know, Chiquita, you can help me out and talk about that as well. But you know, there've been a lot of improvements made in Georgia to address some of that. But when a tax credit program, when changes are made to that program, you know, it takes a while to figure out, okay, what do those changes mean? There are ripple effects to those, and those only really come to light, you know, maybe a couple years or a few years down the road, and then you have to kind of keep refining it and evolving that tax credit. And so I think Georgia's been great because it's been around a long time, it's a generous credit, and they've been willing to really sort of address, you know, things as they pop up and keep improving on the credit. So we appreciate that. We love Georgia, and we thank Georgia for all that they've given us. And so that's a really great example, I think, of a credit that has really created tangible economic benefit for a very big region, and has sort of created a lot of good things. That it's a great story, and they've told the story really well in Georgia. But a friend of mine said, repetition never spoils the prayer. So repeating those success stories and all those great things that are going on, and you know, in all the jurisdictions is going to be key. Yeah. So, can I pass to you?
Yeah, so I'm excited for this question because I think it's, you know, we have a couple of things that we can talk about. Something that Dave didn't mention is Georgia gives an incentive against above the line and below the line, and you can't get that everywhere. It's just that simple. And so when you're talking to a financier, when you're looking at your budget, you want to get an incentive off of as many dollars as possible. So that puts Georgia ahead so many different jurisdictions. It's an uncapped program. So we don't have a, hey, you know, you can only spend but this much. If you spend it, and it's good on paper and you have a good audit, you will get that incentive for that amount. Going back to some of the things that we've done well, and I hope we continue to do, is being responsive to the industry. And every jurisdiction can't say that, you know, that it may not be what some folks call a producer-friendly environment, but there are rules that are written. There are expectations for audits. That information is applied across the board to studios and indies. And as long as you are seeking the information and reaching out to whether it's the Department of Revenue or whether it is the film office, you will get an answer to your question. And that has made Georgia be very a space, the ecosystem that you talked about. And I think that what we have to continue to do and understand, and so for all of you Georgia producers that are in the room, for Sheena, for Reggie, you know, I'm calling you all out because it requires all of us with the Georgia Entertainment News, with the folks at Monarch, to continue to be advocates for the program. And wherever you are, if Allison calls on you and needs some help in Montana, be an advocate for the program. You have to speak up for your projects. You have to talk about what the incentive means to you in your particular jurisdiction, because Dave said something that is true. We can't take any challenges to the program. Challenges scare people away and make them not want to plan, because productions are not, you plan for it today, but you might actually shoot in December and you're posting later. You know, we can't have a unsurety about what 2026 will hold. So to me, one of the most important things for not only the film commissioners to do, but it's our jobs as producers, as folks that are in the industry, to make sure that we're supporting the film offices and those folks that are advocating for more incentives and also for steady incentives. That's the only way we'll be able to keep Georgia as a powerhouse and any incentive as a powerhouse.
Thanks, Chiquita. Stephen, I learned that your company recently purchased a large studio in Dallas, which is the largest soundstage now in Dallas. And that's even before, any announcement of a potential enhanced Texas film credit, which is about $498 million, I think. That's still going through the budget process, but can you give us an idea why you decided on Texas even without all those incentives available in other states or countries? That'd be good to know.
Yeah, it started like it does for films with me, right? And it starts with, like a film starts with the script, right? If the story's not moving to me, I don't care to make the film, because making a film is like being punched in the face repeatedly until it's released. And so in this case, I found a studio that had been, the background of it abridged is, it was a cotton distribution facility in the 40s. And then in the 90s, a Texas oil man said, I'm gonna make movies. So he made it a movie studio and built a water tower that doesn't function because Warner Brothers has a water tower. And so he went bankrupt, believe it or not. And then it just sat there for about 30 years. And then one of the founders of Film USA, Tony Armour, became the Dallas Film Commissioner. He and I have a long relationship. He called me and said, I know it's not what you do, but why don't you come and look at this space I just toured? And I saw it and just sort of had a vision for it and how I could fit it into Talon. And a week later, I shook hands on a term sheet and bought it and renovated it for a year and a half, and it launched on January 14th. So it started with a good deal on a good property. It's downtown Dallas, so I challenge anybody else to find property at the value we got for it. So it's just a good deal in and of itself. But now zooming out to the tax credit talk, Texas is the 13th largest economy in the world, if it was its own country. If they could be convinced to stand up a program that's reputable and consistent like Georgia, which they have not done historically, they are immediately very competitive. So my thought was, there's enough commercial work here. DFW is a huge hub for Fortune 500. I think it's the biggest per capita Fortune 500 for Metroplex in the country. And I got a deal, like I said, so we'll be able to float operations based on commercials. I'm a producer, I can drive narrative there. If commercials pay for my operations, I can give my studio and all of our assets in kind to my projects. So the money we raise doesn't go to my studio. The studio collects the points for that, the back end. And those dollars go to better talent to make a better sale. And if I can do that a few times, maybe the government there will finally believe that Texas can be this. And if I've been consistent, that's power for us to go lobby them to improve the incentive to be something competitive. And so that was my thought process and why. And then the thought is, if that does happen, I'm in downtown Dallas and was there first, and there's a real first mover advantage to that. So, we're working on it. I'm certainly small potatoes compared to Taylor Sheridan, who's shooting in Fort Worth and in Montana, 800 shows a day. I don't know how many he does. It's a lot. But if there are enough of us doing that, it becomes economically undeniable, I hope, to the government to make the incentive more competitive.
That's awesome news. Last but not least, Fred, I know you have a lot of experience in New York. There's been a lot of talk with the recent expansion talk of New York incentives, especially how it affects independent filmmakers. Can you give some insight of what you know regarding the enhanced incentives for New York to be more competitive?
Well, New York's big problem for quite a while has been the amount of time it takes to get the credit. And the governor's budget came out within the past week, and there are efforts to finally improve the turnaround time and be more favorable to indies as well. I think that probably happened because debt financing really started to dry up for New York productions because lenders want to come in and make a 1 or 2 year loan, not a 3 to 5. And New York just really wasn't getting it done as far as that goes. So it's not clear right now exactly how they're going to speed everything up. I personally believe one of the things they need to do is add staff to the department. Nobody ever talks about that, and I'm sure if they hear me say that, they're not going to be happy with me, but we have to work with the department, and they have a $700 million program, and they have other tax credits as well, and they're all run by a small department. So I think that besides creating new laws that sound great for the program, they should also budget more for staff. But one big thing that's in the governor's proposed budget, well, a couple of big things. There's one, they have something called a Production Plus package, which if you're making 2 films, I believe, at least 2 films with a cost of 100 million or more, you'll get a 10% bump on the credit. So I'm sure, Dave, you're interested in that. And then for the indie filmmakers, if you're making at least 2 films with a total, I believe it's either 10 or 20 million, you'll get a 5% bump, which of course leaves out the films that are coming in at $1 million to $2 million, which plenty of people are still making. In addition to that, there's a new program or a new section of the law actually that's being proposed to allocate $100 million a year to independent films. And within that 100 million, I believe 80% goes to films 10 million or more, and 20% will go to films 10 million or less. And I know the state is exploring the possibility of letting an indie film in that bucket submit their application much sooner than is normally the case. Normally in New York, you have to wait until the movie is done. This is the case in many states. Before you can submit your final application for the credit, and now they're trying to figure out a way to let a film submit the application once you've wrapped principal, particularly if you're not going to engage in post in New York. And that would be a very significant step for indies in terms of getting their money faster. So I just want to say, because I know you wanted to get into the federal issue, Dave, you mentioned the issues of a stable program and administrative ease. In our work, we work not only in the planning part of film deals, but we're the ones that are there at the end doing the audit type work, dealing with tax departments, dealing with economic development departments. And there's many, many states that have programs. Each one is different. Each has its own idiosyncrasies. And many of them change. And some of them change when the governor changes. And remember the story with Massachusetts years ago where the guy wasn't in favor of the person running for, right. So, I really hear you loud and clear on that, because we face the same thing. And when programs change frequently, it makes it very hard to just do our job and say, okay, this counts or this doesn't count. Along those lines, the whole idea of a federal film commission and creating some program at the federal level so that there's like one size fits all, because that's what the foreign jurisdictions have. And that's, that is a big benefit when you're looking to work with a program. How does it work? What do I have to do to get my money, and when am I going to get it? And the more stability there is in a program and the more administrative ease means that when you go to deal with the agency, you can talk to somebody who knows, and you're going to get a simple answer. Better yet, if the answer's on the website. And
Going to the Federal Film Commission.
I think that would be a big step in that direction. To create that kind of, one size fits all and make it easier to make decisions.
Great. We're running a bit late here, but I wanted to ask Allison, since you're in Film USA, and also, you guys have talked about creating a federal film commission. I think what Katie was telling us earlier, and also they wrote a great white paper in December, if you want to read it, about creating a film commission for federal U.S. It's really a two-step process. You can't really have an incentive program yet. You need to have the Federal Film Commission first. Can you tell us a little bit of what you guys are doing at Film USA to hopefully get that commission and started?
Yeah, so it's Film USA, as you know, is an open to every U.S. Commission group, and we are representing the United States, both domestically and internationally. And it is a kind of an irony that the United States is a massive exporter of consumer film product around the world, yet amongst the major countries that do film productions, we're a place that does not have a federal level representative with other countries. So many other countries have a Ministry of Culture or an Arts or a Film Commission, and they represent the country at that level, especially going into, you've all heard of the G7 talks and Davos and things like that. Those types of organizations really represent the interests of their country. And so with that, Film USA is really searching to unite the film commissions in the United States so that you do have a unified voice when that comes up. Because, you're sitting there in your office and all of a sudden, you're watching, a major news thing and something comes across and you're like, oh, that would be nice to know if we'd known about that earlier or if we'd known about it at all. And who do we talk to? And there are, of course, several divisions at the State Department that deal with, pieces of arts and culture, and we have different entertainment presences overseas, but we don't have a unified person or office to represent the United States.
One of the questions I've been asked, with the new administration and of course the DOGE initiative, how will that impact probably you guys trying to create a federal film commission when they're trying to, have less, less bureaucracy in the government right now?
Well, I think where, sometimes you have a lot of different separate divisions looking at, small pieces of an issue. Like you have export and trade, and then you have commerce, and then you have the National Endowment for the Arts, and then you have something else in the State Department, and then you have international relations. I personally would think that consolidating those under a federal film office would be a government efficiency. So, Katie is obviously spending a lot of time on this, but I think that a federal film office, in terms of what we're doing at Film USA, helps the government be more efficient in providing services and working in our export situations.
Thank you. We're running a bit late, but I just wanted to ask each person on the panel one last question. If you had one action item or one recommendation that you want to share with the audience to improve filmmaking in the U.S., what would that be?
Well, my personal one is filmmaker education, so I'm right with you on that. We have fabulous creative filmmakers, and we have filmmakers that really, strive to be good business people. And, the film industry is a fragmented world of gig workers, and so creating unified information that helps them be better business people, that's my really focus this next year in our commission.
And I'm just going to piggyback off of that. I think it's about education and advocacy, and and filling in the gaps and identifying those gaps and knowing your audience. And I'm thinking from the perspective of a potential national film office or film commission. That can range. That advocacy can range from talking to members of Congress all the way down to working in lockstep with state film commissions, and understanding what are the specifics in each of those jurisdictions. It can also mean going international and trying to bring in inbound production. More production at the end of the day is good, wherever that is coming from. And really putting it in the terms that your audience will understand. If you're talking to a jurisdiction that doesn't see a lot of film activity, explaining to them, like, if we bring a film in, you're going to see your local mom and pop dry cleaner is gonna see a huge bump in business. Restaurants, all the things that we all know, but really putting it and making it, very clear what's in it for them, even if they're not tuned into the artistic part of it. You can really put it in economic terms, and that's human nature. Everybody wants to know what's in it for me. So, and then of course on the cultural side and the creative side, have that office be a real ambassador for American films and American stories, and there's always room to see those translate further across the world. And in Netflix, we've seen those stories really sort of take off in a lot of ways. So to see more of that would be amazing.
Thanks, Dave. Chiquita?
Yeah, going back to filmmaker education, I'd love to see more filmmakers better understand incentives and knowing how to utilize them. So one project when I worked at, I won't say what studio because all of them, but one project might have 4 different incentives, right? So you may shoot and spend $1 million here. You have a $5 million project, $1 million here for this scenery in Montana. You may come and, a different part of the project requires a cityscape, so you're in Georgia. And then you're going to take it and get a post-production incentive in New York. I don't see enough filmmakers that are thinking about that. Don't just post or do VFX where you're from because it'll be easy for you. That's what technology is for. Screen sharing and doing all of these different things I don't know about, but I know you can get an incentive for it if you spend the right amount of money. And so I'd love to see more producers and filmmakers that are just open to learning more, that call me with different questions, that want to understand, because I want to see more people get invested in by Talon. I want to see more jurisdictions that are offering these, hybrid incentives where it's post only because they're trying to build up their gig workers and make sure that they have proper editors and colorists and things of that nature. So I think that the more of that we're doing and the more the filmmakers are considering different areas and different portions and talking to the Steves, the Freds, talking to the Chiquitas to find out, it's just really you, right? Like, yeah, well, but this is what he wants to see. He wants to see you thinking outside the box. And the Chiquitas to find out what you can do with your $4 or $5 million incentive, with your $4 or $5 million budget. That's what I'd love to see more of, not just this very linear thinking, because I guarantee you for these $20 and $30 million projects, it is not just one incentive. It's just not. There's something that's transferable, something that's a grant, there's in-kind services, it's all over the place.
Thank you. Stephen?
No, I'm kidding.
I used your words.
Yeah. No, all of this, I would have said versions of different parts. So, take that to heart. So I'm going to be really producer self-centered here. I want more soft dollars and I want it to come back faster. I can make more projects, I can create more art, and I can sustain my partner creatives if I get the money back quicker and I'm spending less and risking less hard dollars per project. And I think a federal film office being able to sit kind of as a quarterback on top of the states, but not replacing them, but working in tandem with them to help coordinate is critical. I shoot stuff here, I shoot stuff overseas. I don't have a lot of friends from overseas who come shoot here, and there's a reason for that. And I think a federal film office that's able to bolster, interact with, help facilitate state-level incentives apart from whatever they come up with maybe in the future on their own is critical. Your turn.
I'll piggyback off what everybody has said. I think at the filmmaker level, the education issue is huge. We always encourage people to build a team of people on the business side as well as the creative side. There are people that work with the industry all day long. I do, Chiquita does, and there's others, and we're happy to talk about this stuff, but this is what we know, this is what we do. And if the filmmaker can really understand what opportunities are out there and also what potential adverse effects can happen if they don't carry on in a certain way, I think that all goes to helping the filmmakers. So build a team, work with people who work with the industry regularly, really tap into people whose core expertise is what you're paying them for. I think that at the larger level, I really like the idea of more soft incentives and the faster turnaround time, because the bottom line is someone's investing in the film and they need a return, and it's going to look at, what do you want from me and what am I going to get back and when? And so turnaround time is something that I don't think all states fully understand. I don't think it's a hard thing to communicate, and soft money is a big incentive. It's one way to offset other costs that a film has to incur, and the cost of making a film here has definitely become a big issue recently. I had a lunch recently with a couple of indie filmmakers, and they told me they don't know if they're going to keep making films in this country. And I know that more soft money would certainly help them keep making films in this country. So I like the idea of soft money and faster turnaround time at the industry level.
Thank you, Fred. Again, I want to thank all the panelists here, Allison, Dave, Chiquita, Stephen, Fred. Thank you for joining us here. Hopefully we'll do another Sundance panel next year. I'm praying to God that it's going to be in Park City. This might be the last one in Park City, so it's actually great that we're doing this panel. But I want to thank also the audience for being here. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be here starting at 7 o'clock. We're going to have our Meet the Film Commissioners party. Many of the Film USA commissioners will be in attendance, so we look forward to meeting you at the party at 7 o'clock. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Marco, and thank you to Monarch Private Capital for having us here.
Thank you.